Hey guys, tonight we're going way back. So far back that even the pyramids would look like newcomers in this story. We're heading to the days before pharaohs and stone temples, when the world's first cities were nothing more than damp clusters of mudbrick huts huddled beside restless rivers. You probably wouldn't last a day here. No coffee, no air conditioning, and definitely no Wi-Fi. Just mud, mosquitoes, and the occasional flood to keep you humble. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these late-night journeys reach across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night hums with insects. Somewhere nearby, a marsh frog croaks, its sound echoing faintly off the flat, wet land. You're half asleep, but a thin plume of smoke rising from a hearth brings you back to the present. The air smells of reeds and wet clay. This is the Fertile Crescent, around 6000 BCE. You live with your small community in a cluster of huts that seem to melt into the landscape itself. The world is simple: wake, gather, plant, sleep. Yet something in the air feels different, like the earth itself is preparing to remember. You rise with the sun, feet sinking slightly into the soft ground. All around, the river gleams in morning gold. People have started to stay put here, not because they love mud, but because the river gives life, grain, fish, reeds for baskets, and the occasional surprise flood that wipes it all away. Still, they return, because this is the first whisper of home. A woman beside you grinds barley between two stones. The rasping rhythm blends with the sound of wind through the rushes. That grinding, monotonous, endless, is the heartbeat of the first settlements. Some call them proto-villages. Others say they were simply big families refusing to move. But whatever you call it, the wandering years are ending. You help patch a wall with wet clay. The texture is cool, soft, almost alive. When it dries, it will turn pale and hard, like bone. It feels eternal, though historians still argue whether this permanence was intentional or accidental. Did people plan to stay, or did they just forget to leave? At night, the air cools, and fires flicker in shallow pits. You sit beside one, watching tiny sparks dance upward into the dark. A child asks an elder why people don't move anymore. The old man smiles and points toward the grain baskets stacked under a thatched shelter. Because the gods live in the grain, he says. You nod, not because you believe him, but because it feels true. Days blend into weeks. The first communal storage pits appear. Everyone helps dig, line them with clay, and cover them carefully. You realize that storing food changes everything. It ties you to the land. It also means that for the first time, people can count what they have. Counting turns into ownership. Ownership turns into argument. One evening, a flood rushes in from the far bend of the river. Water roars through the village, tearing huts apart like paper. You climb onto a roof, shivering, clutching a bundle of dried fish. Around you, cries echo in the darkness. The next morning, the world smells of rot and silt. The survivors begin rebuilding before the mud has even settled. They use the same clay, the same hands, but this time the walls are thicker, stronger, higher. Civilization is learning through repetition. In a few generations, these clustered huts will harden into the outlines of a true village. Fires will burn in the same places for centuries. Babies will be born where others died. And somewhere deep in the collective memory, the idea of place will take root. At night, you lie on your back, watching the stars shimmer in the dark river water. You wonder if people have always watched the same constellations, searching for meaning in patterns. Maybe one day, someone will name them, track them, and call that knowledge. But for now, you just breathe the damp night air and listen to the world invent itself. It's quiet, except for the low murmur of frogs and the distant howl of a jackal. The fire beside you fades to embers, and you realize this is how it all begins, not with kings or empires, but with mud, firelight, and footsteps echoing in the dawn. Morning rises like a slow exhale. The world glows bronze and amber, and the mud beneath your feet glistens as if remembering last night's storm. You stand near the riverbank, watching people scoop handfuls of clay, mixing it with straw and water. Their hands move rhythmically, as if following an ancient memory no one recalls learning. This is how it begins: clay and water dreams turning into walls, vessels, and eventually, the bones of a city. The air smells of smoke and wet reeds. You join them, kneeling beside a half-built wall, pressing your fingers into the soft mixture. It squelches satisfyingly. Around you, laughter echoes. Someone tells a joke about how the gods must love mud, because they keep sending so much of it. You smile, the kind of dry humor that keeps people alive when everything they own can dissolve in a single flood. Once, people only built temporary shelters, woven huts and reed roofs that could vanish as easily as they appeared. But now, something is shifting. These walls aren't just for sleeping under, they're for storing grain, keeping warmth, and marking a space that says, mine. The very act of stacking bricks together is an act of faith, faith that you'll be here tomorrow. As the walls rise, the air hums with energy. The settlement smells of new clay baking under the sun. The mud turns from dark brown to pale gold. Cracks form, spiderwebbing across the surfaces, and people patch them instinctively, smoothing the seams with wet palms. These early masons don't know it, but they're inventing architecture. By midday, the heat becomes heavy, pressing against your skin like a second layer. You retreat into the shade of a half-finished room. Inside, it's cool and silent. You run your hands along the rough interior, feeling the imprints of other fingers still preserved in the clay. Every mark is a signature, though no one yet knows how to write their name. Outside, a woman shapes a large clay vessel. She turns it slowly, balancing it on a flat stone, her eyes narrowed in concentration. When she's done, she traces a simple line across it, a mark to identify her household. It's not writing, not yet, but it's the thought that counts. Historians still argue whether these marks were decorative or practical, but either way, they're the first flickers of individuality in a world still learning what self means. As the sun lowers, you notice that the clay huts catch the light differently. The village begins to glow. The walls reflect sunset like embers, turning the whole landscape into a soft orange mirage. Children chase each other between drying bricks, leaving footprints in the damp earth. Somewhere, a flute plays a simple melody, rising and falling like the river itself. That night, as you sit by the fire, the village elder tells a story. The gods taught us to build, he says, his voice gravelly and slow. They saw us shivering in the reeds and took pity. They showed us how to make clay live. You glance at the walls around you and think, maybe he's right. There's a kind of breath inside these structures. A soft hiss when wind passes through tiny cracks, a whisper that makes you feel less alone. The stars rise, bright and cold. Someone points out the pattern of 3 in a row, the same alignment that, thousands of years later, will crown the pyramids of Giza. But here, no one knows of pyramids. They only know the rhythm of the river, the weight of mud, and the dream of permanence. In the morning, the walls will be dry enough to paint. The people will grind red ochre and black soot, smearing the colors into geometric lines. They don't yet understand beauty as an abstract idea, only that decoration brings protection, that color keeps spirits content. Even the smallest gesture here has meaning, even if no one can explain it. You close your eyes, feeling the faint vibration through the ground, the subtle tremor of many footsteps moving in rhythm. This isn't just labor, it's the beginning of collective dreaming, where many minds shape one reality. Cities aren't born in war or glory, they rise in quiet moments like this, when the sound of drying clay and laughter mixes with the first blush of human ambition. When the night finally cools the land, you lie beside a wall still radiating warmth from the day. You rest your cheek against it, and it hums softly, like a sleeping creature. Somewhere deep inside, the clay remembers water, remembers hands. And though you don't yet know it, you're resting against the first heartbeat of civilization. Morning begins with the soft scrape of stone on clay. The sound comes from the far side of the village, where a man sits cross-legged, carving small shapes out of pebbles. You wander closer and watch as he presses one into a lump of wet clay. A small circle, then a triangle, then another. Around him lie dozens of similar pieces. Tiny, meaningless at first glance, but together they tell a story. Or rather, they count one. You ask what he's doing and he grins. Barley, he says, holding up a small cone-shaped token. 2 baskets. Then he gestures at another. Goats. 3. The symbols are simple, but the idea is enormous. This is the beginning of record-keeping, the first bureaucracy in the world. Born not from philosophy or art, but from the need to track food. The air smells of earth and smoke. The man drops his tokens into a small clay envelope and seals it shut with wet mud. Before it dries, he presses one more mark on the surface. The same symbols repeated, a visible reminder of what's inside. You realize this is something brand new, information that can outlast the voice that spoke it. The first seed of writing has been planted. Nearby, a woman counts bundles of reeds and marks them on another tablet. She isn't sure why she's doing it, only that the elders say it's important. It feels strangely satisfying to press symbols into soft clay, to see thought turn solid. Even now, thousands of years later, archaeologists still find these clay tablets, small, cracked, and often meaningless to us. But at the time, they were nothing less than memory made physical. By midday, the sun turns harsh. You retreat into the shade of a half-finished wall, where a group of people discuss how to divide the harvest. Words are sharp here. Everyone wants fairness, but no one agrees on what that means. Someone jokes that maybe the gods should count for them next time. The laughter feels thin. For the first time, you sense that the invention of counting also invents disagreement. That night, the elder calls the village together. He holds up one of the clay envelopes and announces how much grain each family will receive for the coming moon. There are murmurs, some pleased, some not. It's the first hint of inequality, and though no one says it aloud, you can feel something changing. The world is shifting from trust to record, from memory to math. Later, you sit beside the same man who made the tokens. He's carving new symbols now, more abstract, more refined. These, he says, mean sheep, and this one means the goddess. You ask if they're the same thing. He shrugs. Sometimes, he says, smiling faintly. Historians still argue whether these early signs were purely economic or had spiritual roots, whether writing was born from trade or from prayer. A child comes running, holding a clay bowl etched with wavy lines. Look, she says proudly, my mark. Her parents smile. You realize that once people start marking things, they start to imagine ownership. And from ownership comes pride and fear of loss. You step out into the open, watching the sky turn orange. Smoke from cooking fires curls upward in soft ribbons. The scent of roasting fish fills the air. People sit in small clusters, eating from shared bowls. They talk of rain, of animals, of harvests, ordinary things that feel sacred simply because they are new. Civilization doesn't arrive with fanfare. It seeps quietly into the spaces between hunger and hope. In the distance, thunder rolls. A few drops of rain hit your skin, warm and heavy. You tilt your face upward. The others hurry to cover their grain baskets, to move their drying clay inside. The rain falls harder, washing away footprints, softening walls. You crouch under an overhang and watch the water flow through the streets like tiny rivers. When it passes, the air feels clean again. The clay tokens lie scattered, glinting in the fading light. You pick one up, turning it between your fingers. It's small, unremarkable, but it carries the weight of human thought, the desire to hold onto something, to make memory visible. You tuck it into your pouch. Maybe someday, someone will find it and know that you once stood here, counting barley, counting souls. As night deepens, you lie on your mat inside one of the clay houses. Outside, frogs sing, and the world smells of wet dust and smoke. You think about those little marks pressed into clay, meaningless yet eternal. You think about the people who will come after you, building more, recording more, forgetting the moment when silence turned into symbol. The fire crackles low. A pot steams beside it. You close your eyes, drifting toward sleep, as the first cities dream of permanence, and the first accountants, in their quiet way, begin to invent civilization itself. The morning mist drifts low and silvery, curling around the edges of the huts like something alive. Smoke from a dozen hearths mingles with the river's breath, painting the air in pale ribbons. You rise slowly, joints stiff from the damp. Somewhere in the distance, a bell-like sound echoes, a man beating copper against stone to call people together. You follow the sound through narrow, muddy lanes until you emerge into a clearing dominated by something new. A structure taller than any hut, rising tier by tier from a platform of baked clay. At first glance, it looks like an oversized hill sculpted by human hands. Its steps glisten with dew, and on the top stands a small shrine where incense burns in lazy spirals. This is the temple that breathes, the first great experiment in architecture and faith. It is part granary, part ritual space, part proof that humans now dream vertically. You climb the uneven steps, feeling the clay still warm from the sun of the previous day. Around you, people carry baskets of grain up to the shrine, offering a share of their harvest to the gods, or perhaps just to the priests who speak for them. No one's quite sure where one ends and the other begins. The air smells of smoke, honey, and freshly crushed barley. Inside the upper chamber, you find rows of jars sealed with reed plugs. A priest, his hair dusted with ash, gestures proudly. The god's portion, he says, kept safe from spoilage, guarded from thieves. You realize the cleverness of it. By storing food in a sacred space, the village ensures protection, not just by superstition, but by awe. No one dares steal from the gods. You step back outside and look over the village. From here, it seems almost orderly. Lines of huts, the shimmer of canals, the soft pulse of smoke from cooking fires. The temple rises at the center like a lung, exhaling ritual and inhaling labor. Each offering, each jar, each whispered prayer sustains the same delicate balance between belief and necessity. Children gather at the base, chasing each other through puddles. A woman scolds them, but the laughter continues. It strikes you that these people don't separate work from worship or structure from story. The act of carrying grain up these steps is as sacred as lighting the incense. Civilization, it seems, isn't built from stone or conquest, but from shared routine, from small acts repeated until they become sacred. At midday, the heat thickens, and the temple seems to shimmer. The priests call for more water to be poured on the clay to keep it from cracking. You help carry jars up the slope, spilling some on your feet. The clay cools instantly, hissing softly. It feels alive. Somewhere deep beneath your toes, you sense the hum of stored energy, as though the earth itself is learning to breathe with human rhythm. The priest chants a hymn. You can't understand the words fully, but the melody feels ancient, rising and falling like the river. He thanks the gods for the harvest and asks them to calm the waters. A child beside you mutters, "They always ask, but the river never listens." You hide a smile. That might be the truest prayer of all. As the sun lowers, shadows stretch across the plain. You notice something peculiar. People bow not just to the shrine, but also to the structure itself. The temple has become its own deity, its form commanding reverence simply by existing. Historians still argue whether these early ziggurats were purely functional granaries or dedicated houses of worship, but to the people here, the distinction doesn't matter. The sacred and the practical are one and the same. Evening comes, painting the temple in blood orange light. The air fills with the smell of roasting fish and fresh bread. From the top of the structure, the priest calls down blessings, his voice echoing across the settlement. In return, the villagers light small lamps outside their doors. One by one, the flames bloom like stars, mirroring the heavens above. You sit on a step halfway down the slope, resting your elbows on your knees. The clay beneath you radiates stored warmth from the day. You realize that this mound of mud and straw, crude by later standards, is humanity's first monument. Not to war, not to kings, but to hope. As night deepens, you look toward the horizon. Other faint glows mark other villages, other fires, other dreams taking shape. Soon they will build their own temples, their own places to breathe with the gods. But for now, this one stands alone, glowing faintly under the stars, the first building on earth that dares to touch both heaven and hunger at once. You lie down near its base, lulled by the faint hum of chanting and the steady chirp of insects. The world feels wide yet contained, ancient yet brand new. You close your eyes and let the night wash over you, clay cooling slowly beneath your palms as the temple exhales into the darkness. A living monument to the moment humanity first built not just to survive, but to remember. The sun rises pale and low, spilling silver over marshlands that stretch farther than your eyes can follow. You trudge through soft mud, feeling the cool give beneath your feet, and notice smoke rising in thin columns from distant hearths. This is Eridu, one of the earliest settlements, already humming with life. Even before the pyramids, people are learning to balance desire, survival, and belief, and somewhere in the air there's a tension you can almost taste, the tension of hierarchy being born. Farmers argue quietly over which fields to plant, which canals to dredge. Their words are low, measured, the kind of conversations that decide the fate of families, even when the participants don't realize it. Floods here are not gentle, they are sudden, harsh, and indiscriminate. One season of abundance can vanish overnight, leaving mud and despair behind. You remember the clay walls you patched yesterday, now slightly warped from the previous night's rain. Survival is as much about resilience as it is about skill. In the marketplace, a priest counts offerings: grain, fish, small clay figurines. He gestures at the gathered villagers, reciting ritual phrases that blend thanks with caution. The gods, it seems, are as much about keeping order as inspiring awe. Some elders argue that the god Enki himself taught humans to irrigate, while others whisper that the floodwaters simply forced adaptation. Historians still debate whether religion arose to explain nature, or whether early humans simply needed authority to survive. You pass a group of children molding wet clay into tiny vessels. They giggle as one accidentally smashes a shape, scattering pieces across the floor. The villagers don't scold them. Mistakes are part of the rhythm here. Someone points out a joke about the river god being clumsy and dropping water where he shouldn't. Laughter spreads, lightening the tension of daily life. Even in these early days, humor and play coexist with work and ritual. Later, you follow a canal to see the work of the water bearers. They carry heavy jars, moving slowly yet methodically, ensuring the fields remain irrigated. Without them, the grain would die, and the fragile society could collapse. It is in these mundane acts, carrying water, repairing walls, tending to animals, that society truly forms. The flood has taught lessons in obedience, cooperation, and sometimes quiet resentment. By midday, the village is alive with a strange choreography. Children chase chickens, priests move offerings, farmers haul baskets, and artisans work on tools. Somewhere, a man strikes copper against stone, sparks flying, and you realize that conflict and creation often live side by side. The first tools, used to shape clay or metal, will later shape civilizations, sometimes peacefully, sometimes violently. That afternoon, you hear the first rumble of disagreement over offerings. One group believes more grain should go to the temple, another insists it should stay with the families. Voices rise just enough to catch your attention. The elder mediates, citing the gods and tradition, balancing both sides. You realize this is hierarchy in action, born not from desire for power but from necessity, and soon, social structures will formalize into laws and kings. Evening falls, and the river glints in fading sunlight. Smoke curls above thatched roofs, carrying the scent of roasted fish, bread, and mud. You sit on the bank, dipping your fingers in water, watching reflections of stars beginning to emerge. Somewhere in the distance, a priest intones a low chant, reminding everyone of their place in the order of the world. You feel the quiet pulse of civilization growing, small acts, repeated over seasons, turning a cluster of huts into a settlement with purpose, ritual, and memory. You think of the floods, the laughter, the arguments, the careful offerings of grain. Each is a thread, weaving together into the fragile fabric of early society. The air smells damp, rich with life and labor. You lie back, listening to the water trickle past reeds and roots, imagining centuries ahead, when the memory of these humble efforts will echo in cities far larger, far more complex. For now, though, you rest, cradled by the rhythm of the first civilization learning to balance faith, labor, and survival under an uncertain sky. The sun climbs steadily, glinting off freshly baked mud walls and reflecting in the shallow canals that wind through the village like silver threads. Today, you walk along a structure that stretches farther than any building you've seen so far. A wall surrounding a cluster of houses and temples. This is Uruk, one of the first true cities, already buzzing with commerce, chatter, and subtle tension. As you step onto the compacted clay path atop the wall, the air vibrates with the life below, the rhythm of markets, children, and animals merging into a single, breathing entity. From your vantage point, you watch people trading fish for grain, pottery for reeds, or a few coins of silver for a sack of barley. Someone juggles small clay tokens, amusing a crowd of children while their parents haggle over prices. Beer is everywhere, an essential part of daily life as much as bread. You notice the faint sweetness in the air, mingling with dust and smoke, a smell that will one day become the signature scent of early urban life. Historians still argue whether Uruk was truly a city by modern definitions or more like a cluster of interconnected villages. Walking here, it doesn't matter. You feel the pulse of urbanization in the way streets wind, in the rise of walls, and in the steady hum of human interaction. Even in this early age, people invent complexity almost instinctively. As you move through the narrow streets, a storyteller calls out, recounting tales of Gilgamesh, a figure part king, part myth, who commands both respect and fear. Children gather, wide-eyed, absorbing each exaggeration as truth. You smile. Stories have always shaped cities as much as walls or grain stores. Without myths, the city would be hollow. Later, you pass a bustling tavern run by a woman whose laughter rings above the din of clinking jars. She pours beer from clay vessels, offers advice, and keeps an eye on the market outside. Her presence reminds you that even in a city dominated by gods and kings, ordinary people hold influence in ways historians rarely record. From the wall, you observe laborers reinforcing the outer perimeter, carrying clay and mud in woven baskets. The structure isn't just symbolic, it is practical, a barrier against invaders and floods alike. Yet it also represents something intangible: pride, permanence, and the first collective imagination of a city. People here are aware they are creating something larger than themselves. The sun lowers, casting long shadows across courtyards and streets. Traders pack up, children return home, and a priest ascends the ziggurat to offer evening prayers. The city hums with routine, yet within this rhythm lies the seed of ambition, of hierarchy, and of cultural memory that will outlast generations. Night falls and torches flicker across the walls. You rest against the cool mud, listening to the distant laughter and murmured prayers. The first metropolis breathes beneath you, alive in a way that is both fragile and enduring. You realize that cities are not just walls and streets, but ideas made tangible, forged from mud, effort, and imagination, rising slowly along the riverbanks long before pyramids ever touched the sky. The morning air smells faintly of smoke and wet clay, softened by the river mist curling through Uruk streets. You wander past the market, where merchants arrange baskets of grain, reeds, and fish in careful rows. Amid the crowd, a figure draws your attention, a woman of uncommon presence, standing behind a small tavern that hums with conversation. This is Kababa, a rare legend, a tavern keeper who, through cunning and circumstance, would one day ascend to become queen. You notice her calm demeanor, the way her eyes scan the market as if she can read the very pulse of the city. You follow her briefly, observing as she directs the delivery of fresh bread and beer, settles disputes among patrons, and listens attentively to travelers. She is not a warrior or priest, yet she wields influence as naturally as others breathe. Her story blurs the line between myth and history, a reminder that even in the earliest cities, individuals could reshape destiny. Historians still argue whether Kababa truly ruled or whether her tale is an allegory, but standing here, you feel the weight of possibility in her presence. The tavern is alive with laughter and the smell of cooking grains. You notice a boy quietly scribbling marks into a clay tablet beneath the counter. Kababa glances down, nods approvingly, and says nothing, Perhaps she recognizes the importance of literacy, even in children. Perhaps she understands that knowledge is power, just as much as charm or commerce. Outside, a trader unloads crates of lapis and tin, metals that traveled hundreds of miles to reach the city. The constant hum of trade transforms Uruk into a node of distant connections, linking it to places you cannot see, places that will one day be home to other firsts: writing, law, ritual, and governance. You wonder how she balances so many threads: commerce, hospitality, and the subtle management of influence, all while ordinary villagers focus on survival and routine. You pause near the city wall, watching her speak quietly to a visitor. Her gestures are measured, deliberate, and in them, you sense strategy. Kababa is both ordinary and extraordinary, a figure that teaches that power does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers in taverns and marketplaces, guiding events without grand proclamations. As the day warms, you stroll through the streets, noticing the subtle ways people honor her. A respectful bow, a brief pause in conversation, a quiet glance. Even amidst gods and kings, her authority is palpable, grounded in respect earned through action rather than title. By evening, the city settles into routine. Smoke curls from hearths, laughter softens, and the distant chant from the ziggurat hums through the air. You reflect on the unusual fact that a tavern keeper could rise to rule, wondering about the countless stories lost in time, ordinary people whose presence shaped extraordinary moments. You rest against a sun-warmed wall, feeling the hum of the city beneath your fingertips. In Kababa's quiet strength, you glimpse a truth about early civilizations. Power, memory, and influence often reside in unexpected places, and history remembers them only when the ripple reaches far enough to touch myth. The river fog lifts slowly, revealing Uruk in the soft morning light. You step into the market, where activity hums like a quiet current beneath the city's structured chaos. Merchants gesture, animals bray, and the smell of baked grain fills the air. Here, amid the ordinary bustle, something remarkable is unfolding: bureaucracy, the invisible engine of civilization, humming beneath mud-brick walls. Seated at a low table near the ziggurat, scribes press styluses into soft clay, leaving rows of wedge-shaped marks. These are the first cuneiform symbols, encoding offerings, debts, and ownership. A trader approaches, asking about the amount of grain he owes to the temple. One scribe consults a tablet, then nods. The transaction completes with precision, a dance of inkless ink and pressed clay. You marvel at how belief and paperwork entwine, how devotion and record-keeping are inseparable. Somewhere, a priest whispers to another, "The gods are pleased, for everything is accounted for." The statement is half religious, half practical. The lines between divine favor and human administration blur. Historians still argue whether early writing arose from trade or ritual, but standing here, you see both threads woven together. Belief requires proof. Proof becomes law. Law becomes memory. In the distance, children mimic the scribes, pressing sticks into soft clay to make their own tokens. One girl presses a tiny mark on a tablet and beams at her mother, proud of her first attempt at recording. You notice that control, even at its earliest, relies on participation. Everyone contributes, and everyone is watched. Later, you wander through a narrow lane lined with small shops. Seals of clay hang at doorways, each marked with the emblem of its owner. Merchants use them to authorize transactions, to safeguard contracts, and to signal trustworthiness. A stranger passing by cannot simply claim goods. Proof of identity is encoded in pressed symbols, a system centuries ahead of coinage or signatures. At midday, a small dispute arises over a bundle of reeds. A scribe steps in, consulting his tablets. He points to marks, counts, and finally mediates. The quarrel ends without violence. Civilization, you think, is built not on swords but on symbols, clay and ink replacing brute force, at least for now. By late afternoon, the sun warms the walls and the clay tokens glint softly. You pause to consider the absurdity: gods, kings, merchants, and scribes all converging in this web of accountability, each layer depending on the other. Without the temple, there is no reason for offerings. Without scribes, no proof exists. Without merchants, the economy stalls. Even ordinary villagers participate, unknowingly maintaining the system. As dusk approaches, you hear laughter drifting from the tavern. Kubaba smiles at a visitor, a reminder that human skill and charm can sometimes rival formal authority. The scribes continue their work, their styluses scratching quietly. The city breathes, structured and alive, a living organism of inkless contracts and devotion. Night falls, and lanterns ignite along streets and stairs. You sit near the ziggurat, observing the tiny points of light and thinking about the quiet brilliance of bureaucracy, the way order emerges from ritual, commerce, and belief long before kings ever declared it law. The city hums beneath your fingers, alive with calculation, devotion, and the delicate heartbeat of early civilization. The morning is sharp and clear, and the city hums with movement. Merchants call across the market, children chase each other through narrow lanes, and the scent of freshly baked bread mingles with the river's damp breath. Today, you notice tension threading through the streets. It's subtle, almost invisible, but you sense it everywhere: mud, copper, and blood. Civilization is learning a harsh lesson. When resources are scarce, human ambition quickly turns to conflict. You walk toward the edge of the city, where clay walls rise higher, the pathways narrower, and the clang of metal echoes. A small group of men trains with copper-tipped spears, practicing maneuvers they hope they'll never need. Nearby, another faction argues over access to a canal that provides drinking water and irrigation. Words flare, then settle, but you know, as the elders do, that disputes will not always end in peace. Trade is not enough to sustain harmony. Even in Uruk, the first metropolis, the accumulation of resources brings envy, rivalry, and the occasional skirmish. You notice guards patrolling with copper-tipped staves, keeping watch not for foreign invaders, but for neighbors. The lesson is old and simple: where humans build, humans fight. Historians still debate whether these early conflicts were ritualized or deadly, but the signs are clear. Control, protection, and sometimes violence are inseparable in early urban life. Later, you visit a workshop where artisans are melting copper and hammering it into blades, tools, and ornaments. Sparks fly and mingle with the afternoon sun, and the smell of heated metal fills your lungs. The same hands that build clay walls are now capable of destruction. You think about the duality of creation and destruction, noticing how closely linked they are. One cannot exist long without the other. From the city wall, you see smoke rising in the distance. A small skirmish has broken out over grazing land. Farmers brandish clubs and spears, while guards rush to mediate. It is a reminder that every settlement, no matter how organized, carries the potential for chaos and collapse. Yet the city endures because its structure, walls, canals, temples, is stronger than individual tempers. By sunset, the conflict has cooled, and quiet returns. The river reflects the dying light, and the city exhales slowly. People gather at the ziggurat steps, offering thanks not just for grain, but for the stability that lets them rebuild, repair, and hope. You notice that even in the presence of violence, the pulse of creation continues, as if the earth itself insists on order. Night drapes the city in deep indigo. You walk the walls, feeling the hard clay beneath your palms, listening to distant footsteps and murmured prayers. Somewhere in the hush, the clang of copper fades, replaced by the croak of frogs and the rustle of reeds. You consider that the first wars were never about glory, they were about survival, about control, about protecting what had been painstakingly built from mud, sweat, and human ingenuity. As you settle against a wall, watching the stars reflected in the river, you realize that Uruk has learned an early truth. With creation comes the shadow of destruction, and only careful balance allows civilization to endure. The clay hums beneath your touch, warm from the day's labor, as if reminding you that every building, every spear, every token pressed into soft clay carries both hope and risk. Dawn filters through mist, softening the edges of mudbrick huts and stretching long shadows across Uruk's bustling streets. You follow the familiar hum of the market, where merchants arrange fish, grain, and clay vessels into precise rows. Today, there's a new rhythm. The city's first administrators are walking among the people, checking records, noting shortages, and assigning duties. Civilization is beginning to formalize, and you can almost feel the invisible scaffolding of authority beneath the mud and reeds. A scribe shows you a tablet etched with tallies, grain collected, rations distributed, and labor assigned for canal maintenance. The marks are simple wedges, yet their power is profound. This is organization in its purest form, a method to prevent chaos from overtaking the city. Without it, the river would reclaim the fields, floods would erase homes, and survival would once again depend entirely on luck. You watch as villagers consult the tablet, their actions guided by symbols pressed into soft clay, a silent choreography that binds them together. Nearby, artisans are shaping pottery into standard sizes, ensuring everyone has vessels that fit neatly into storage pits. The standardization seems mundane, but it's revolutionary, a subtle hint that civilization thrives on consistency. Historians still debate whether these practices arose from necessity or ingenuity, but walking here, you sense that both are intertwined. Small innovations ripple outward, reshaping daily life and social structures alike. You wander to a canal where workers dig and dredge under the watchful eye of supervisors. Water flows unevenly, pooling in some places and running dry in others. The supervisors correct the flow, ensuring that crops receive just enough irrigation. You think about the balance: too much water and grain rots, too little and famine looms. The first engineers, you realize, are not constructing monuments. They are negotiating with nature itself, learning to bend rivers to human will. In the evening, children gather on the steps of the ziggurat, mimicking priests as they chant, offering small tokens in clay vessels. Some imitate scribes, pressing symbols into soft tablets. Play and work, ritual and labor intertwine seamlessly in the city's rhythm. You pause to watch a woman distributing rations of beer and bread. Even minor tasks like this carry social weight, reinforcing hierarchy, trust, and respect. The sun sinks low, casting golden light on the city's walls and streets. Smoke spirals from hearths, blending with the earthy aroma of mud and grain. From atop the ziggurat, a priest sings softly, his voice vibrating through the plaza and over the river. The city exhales, its pulse steady and measured, alive in quiet triumph. You rest your hand on the warm clay of the wall and realize that every act, every mark, every offering has been a brick in the structure of civilization. Fragile, yes, but enduring, teaching lessons that will echo through millennia. Night deepens, lanterns glow softly, and the city sleeps under a sky thick with stars. You lie on your back, listening to the distant murmur of water and the occasional laughter of children. Civilization, you think, is not the work of kings or empires alone. It is born in clay, water, and quiet routines, and in the patient persistence of ordinary people learning, day by day, to shape their world. The morning air carries the faint smell of baked clay and smoke, curling lazily through the streets of Uruk. You step carefully along the uneven pathways, observing the daily rituals that sustain the city. Here, amid the bustle, you notice something remarkable: the first forms of law and governance emerging. Elder councils meet beneath the shade of overhanging roofs, mediating disputes, assigning labor, and overseeing trade. Authority is subtle, embedded in routine, yet unmistakable in its effect on daily life. A farmer argues over the division of barley. A scribe consults a tablet, tallying tokens and marks with precision. The elders nod, offering judgment that blends precedent, necessity, and what they believe the gods would approve. No one questions the legitimacy. Compliance here is as much about belief as fear. You feel the weight of the invisible hand guiding human behavior, shaping society through rules that will outlast generations. Historians still debate whether these councils were precursors to formal kingship or simply pragmatic solutions to local disputes. But standing here, the distinction seems almost irrelevant. Nearby, artisans work tirelessly, shaping clay into standardized bricks and vessels. A boy presses his first wedge into a tablet, proud and careful. You smile. Even in play, lessons of order and measurement take root. The smallest acts of routine here have consequences far beyond immediate survival. Civilization grows not in grand gestures alone, but in repetition, ritual, and accountability. At midday, you visit a canal under repair. Water flows unevenly, threatening crops. Workers coordinate with supervisors, shouting instructions and carefully adjusting channels. You recognize that cooperation under stress is a hallmark of the city's endurance. Without careful management of both natural and human resources, the fragile network of mudbrick streets, canals, and storage pits could collapse in a single season. The afternoon sun warms the walls, bringing out faint traces of color on painted tablets and vessels. Children imitate scribes and priests, blending work, ritual, and play. From the ziggurat, a priest chants in low tones, invoking gods who may or may not be listening. You notice that faith and administration are inseparable here. The sacred and the practical entwine in ways you will later read about in dusty tomes but rarely feel firsthand. As dusk settles, merchants close their stalls, and the aroma of roasting fish drifts along the canals. Smoke curls around the corners of the city, and a gentle hush descends. You pause on the steps of the ziggurat, reflecting on the rhythm of the day. Disputes mediated, grain counted, water controlled, and rituals performed. Each action is a thread in a tapestry of early urban life, fragile yet resilient, mundane yet profoundly transformative. Night deepens, lanterns glimmer, and the river whispers beneath the city walls. You lay your head against a cool stone, listening to the soft murmur of life. Uruk breathes slowly in the darkness, its pulse steady and deliberate. Civilization, you understand, is not merely walls, temples, or ziggurats. It is the quiet orchestration of people, clay, and water, a human heartbeat echoing across time. Dawn breaks over Uruk with a soft, silvery light that glances off the mud-brick walls and the gentle ripples of the river. You rise from your mat and wander along the canal, where water carriers trudge back and forth, balancing jars on their shoulders. Every droplet counts here, every channel maintained with care, because without it, the crops wither and famine spreads quietly but swiftly. Civilization, you realize, is as much about water as it is about walls or temples. In the market, traders haggle over fish, barley, and reeds, their voices blending into a continuous hum. A scribe counts tokens for a recent trade, carefully marking the tally on a tablet. You notice the symmetry between commerce and record-keeping. The physical act of pressing wedges into clay becomes a silent agreement between people, binding promises with permanence. Some of these tablets are simple, others elaborate, hinting at early bureaucracy, a system historians still debate regarding its efficiency and purpose. You pass a workshop where artisans shape clay into vessels, refine copper tools, and carve decorative symbols. The sound of hammers and knives striking metal fills the air. Nearby, a young boy imitates their movements, pressing his small fingers into soft clay as if he already understands the importance of record and order. Play and education blend seamlessly here. Children learn the foundations of urban life not through formal instruction, but by observation and imitation. Later, you climb the ziggurat steps, feeling the uneven clay under your feet. At the top, the view stretches over the settlement, canals, streets, and courtyards forming an intricate network. People move in purposeful patterns, guided by routine, hierarchy, and shared belief. Some pray to gods you cannot see, while others tend the fields below. Everything seems ordinary, yet it is extraordinary in its coordination, in its subtle orchestration of human energy into sustained community. A priest gestures toward a freshly baked offering of bread and barley. Villagers place small bowls at the altar's edge, while others whisper prayers. You sense the interplay of faith and administration. Rituals serve both spiritual and practical purposes, ensuring cooperation and social cohesion. Even the mundane act of distributing food becomes imbued with symbolic weight, a reminder that order in early cities is never purely secular. As the sun dips toward the horizon, smoke curls from cooking fires, casting long shadows across streets and canals. Children mimic rituals, adults settle disputes, and artisans finish their work. You pause to reflect on the subtle triumph of this society. a network of people, labor, and ritual functioning with remarkable precision, centuries before kings or empires formalized their authority. Night deepens and lanterns flicker along the canals. You lie on the soft riverbank, listening to distant prayers, the hum of insects, and the gentle flow of water. Uruk breathes as a living entity, its heartbeat slow and steady, its foundations laid not merely in clay, but in routine, cooperation, and quiet human ingenuity. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of the city soothe you into a contemplative, restful silence. The first light of morning filters through a haze of river mist, turning mudbrick walls into soft, glowing amber. You walk the narrow lanes of Uruk, noticing subtle changes since your last visit. Children scamper between houses, carrying small clay tokens they've pressed themselves, learning early lessons in trade, accountability, and social hierarchy. Every action, even the seemingly trivial, contributes to the rhythm that sustains the city. You pause at a workshop where a craftsman hammers copper into tools and ornaments. Sparks fly, scattering across the floor like tiny stars. You realize that technology is inseparable from survival. Tools shape labor, and labor shapes civilization. In a corner, a scribe meticulously records quantities of grain and livestock on clay tablets. The combination of craft, record-keeping, and ritual hints at a society developing complex interdependencies, the kind that historians still debate as the defining feature of early cities. The marketplace buzzes with activity. Merchants exchange goods, negotiate prices, and consult tablets to confirm past agreements. A young apprentice notes discrepancies, learning that fairness often rests on careful record-keeping rather than innate morality. You watch as the city hums with quiet coordination, offerings delivered to temples, food distributed among families, water channels maintained with care. Order emerges not from force, but from repeated, disciplined practice. From atop the ziggurat, the city stretches in geometric patterns, a patchwork of huts, streets, and canals. Priests perform morning rituals, offering thanks for the harvest and guidance for the laborers below. You notice that the sacred and the practical are inextricably linked here. Ritual enforces order, and order reinforces belief. Even ordinary villagers follow the rhythm without conscious thought, weaving their lives seamlessly into the social fabric. As the day progresses, minor conflicts flare and dissipate. Disputes over grazing land, arguments about canal maintenance, and debates on temple offerings. Elders mediate patiently, their decisions often guided as much by precedent as by the perception of divine will. The city thrives because it balances authority, cooperation, and ritual, a precarious equilibrium historians still study, wondering how much was intentional versus emergent. By evening, the smell of cooking fires, baked bread, and drying reeds fills the air. Children chase chickens, women tend hearths, and the distant chant of priests carries over the river. You sit against a sun-warmed wall, watching lanterns light one by one, reflecting in the water. Civilization here is fragile yet enduring, constructed from mud, labor, memory, and belief. Night descends softly. The city exhales, and you lie on the edge of the canal, lulled by its rhythm. You realize that the heartbeat of Uruk is quiet but persistent, a delicate orchestration of work, ritual, and community, echoing long before monumental pyramids and imperial ambitions took shape. In the hush of night, you drift into reflection, feeling the subtle pulse of early civilization beneath your fingertips. The dawn mist lingers low over Uruk, softening the sharp lines of the mudbrick walls and the shimmering canals. You wander through streets that pulse with life, children darting between market stalls, merchants exchanging tokens and goods, and artisans shaping clay into vessels both practical and ceremonial. Today, you notice a subtle tension threading through the city, ambition quietly stirring among ordinary people, hinting at the first stirrings of social mobility. You stop at a small gathering near the ziggurat. A man demonstrates a new type of plow, its blade sharper and deeper than older designs. Farmers nod appreciatively, weighing the potential yield against the labor required. Innovations like this quietly shift the balance of power and productivity in ways historians still debate. Was progress driven by necessity, ingenuity, or the subtle push of competition? Watching here, you see all three at play. Nearby, a scribe tallies grain deliveries, marking wedges into a clay tablet with precision. The act seems mundane, yet it ensures fairness, maintains social cohesion, and reinforces authority. The priest overseeing the transaction murmurs prayers of thanks, blending ritual with administration. You notice how seamlessly practical needs intertwine with spiritual devotion, a hallmark of early urban life. In a small courtyard, children imitate adult behaviors. Some mimic scribes, pressing shapes into soft clay. Others enact small marketplaces, trading seeds and tokens with fierce enthusiasm. Play here is not trivial. It is training for participation in a complex social system, embedding lessons about fairness, cooperation, and hierarchy. Even minor actions carry consequence, shaping the rhythms of daily life that allow the city to function. As the afternoon sun warms the city, a dispute erupts over water rights from the canal. Elders mediate patiently, consulting records and appealing to precedent, custom, and what they interpret as divine will. The resolution is pragmatic, ensuring the survival of crops while reinforcing social order. You realize that early governance is not abstract. It is enacted moment by moment, a delicate dance of human negotiation, authority, and shared belief. By evening, smoke spirals from hearths, mingling with the scent of roasted grains and drying reeds. Merchants close stalls, children scatter homeward, and the priests offer their final evening prayers. From your perch atop a low wall, you watch lanterns flicker along the streets and reflections shimmer in the canal. Uruk hums quietly, alive with the interwoven rhythms of labor, ritual, and human ingenuity, a city that thrives in the balance of faith, governance, and daily practice. Night deepens and the world slows. You lean against a sun-warmed wall, listening to the distant calls of traders and the gentle lapping of water. Civilization feels both fragile and enduring, a living testament to persistence, cooperation, and the subtle, patient orchestration of ordinary lives. The first light of dawn spills softly over Uruk, brushing the canals and streets in a pale glow. You wander through the city, feeling the pulse of daily life beneath your fingertips, merchants arranging baskets of grain, fish, and reeds, children chasing each other across uneven clay paths, artisans hammering copper, shaping tools and ornaments with quiet focus. Today, you sense the culmination of centuries of incremental effort, the first cities reaching a fragile, enduring maturity. You pause at the ziggurat, listening to the low chant of priests as they offer thanks for harvests and safe waters. Ritual, work, and governance intertwine seamlessly here. A scribe presses the final tally of the day's grain onto a clay tablet, the wedge-shaped symbols capturing human intent and memory. Even in this early age, records shape reality, guiding behavior, resolving disputes, and preserving social cohesion. Historians still debate whether the earliest tablets served primarily as legal tools, accounting records, or instruments of religious devotion, but in practice, they embody all three. Across the plaza, a tavern keeper named Kababa greets travelers and mediates minor disputes, her influence subtle yet palpable. You realize that power in these first cities does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers through commerce, skill, and personal respect. Children imitate her attentiveness, learning lessons in diplomacy and leadership without formal instruction. Even play becomes a means of training for civic life. The afternoon sun warms the clay walls, casting long shadows across canals and courtyards. Water carriers trudge along the edges, their jars heavy but balanced. Artisans refine tools and vessels, while farmers repair channels and tend fields. The city hums with coordination, a delicate choreography of labor, belief, and memory. You note the quiet genius of this structure. Survival depends on cooperation, and cooperation is codified through routine, ritual, and careful administration. As dusk falls, smoke curls from cooking fires, mingling with the earthy scent of the river and drying reeds. Merchants close stalls, children return home, and the priests offer final evening prayers. Lanterns flicker along streets and canals, reflecting 1,000 tiny points of light. You sit atop the ziggurat, listening to the gentle murmur of the city. Uruk is alive, breathing, a living organism built from clay, labor, faith, and human ingenuity. Even as the night deepens, you sense the legacy of these early builders. Every brick, every token, every ritual gesture is a thread in the fabric of civilization. The lessons of cooperation, record-keeping, and human ingenuity will echo for millennia, long before the first pyramids rise in the distance. You feel the city's pulse slowing, merging with your own breath, as the rhythm of early civilization lulls you into quiet reflection. The night stretches slowly over Uruk, deep and velvety, as if the city itself is inhaling and exhaling in a steady, measured rhythm. You lie on the riverbank, fingertips brushing the cool, damp clay, listening to the soft chorus of frogs and insects, the occasional splash of water against the canal walls. Every sound, every scent, smoke curling from distant hearths, the faint sweetness of baking grain, the damp aroma of the river, lulls you further into calm. The world feels suspended, held in the delicate balance of human effort and natural rhythm. You think of the people you've walked alongside today: children pressing clay tablets, farmers adjusting the flow of canals, artisans hammering copper into shape, scribes recording the day's transactions with quiet precision. Each act, repeated day after day, builds more than homes or walls. It builds memory, order, and civilization itself. Even in their mundane routines, they are shaping the future, setting foundations that will echo across millennia. The glow of lanterns reflects softly in the water, casting gentle ripples that dance across the canals. Smoke rises in lazy spirals, blending with the night air, and somewhere in the distance, the soft chanting of priests hums a lullaby that has been sung for generations. You imagine the city as a living organism, each heartbeat of labor, ritual, and play synchronized, quiet but persistent. As your breath slows, you feel the subtle pulse of Uruk under your fingertips, a rhythm both fragile and enduring. Civilization here was not built in grandeur, but in patience, cooperation, and small, repeated acts of care. Every token pressed into clay, every canal dredged, every prayer whispered into the air, carries the weight of human ingenuity and resilience. Let the soft murmur of water, the distant laughter of children, and the gentle rhythm of the city's heartbeat carry you into rest. You are cradled by centuries of quiet effort, by a world that is alive, enduring, and softly breathing alongside you.